This episode is sponsored by PAX, the gold standard in emergency response bags. So when you're working under pressure, you need kit to be both dependable, tough and intuitive, and that's exactly what you get with PAX. Every bag is handcrafted by expert tailors who understand the demands of personal care. From the high-tech, skin-friendly and environmentally responsible materials to the cutting-edge welding process that reduces seams and makes cleaning easier. PAX absolutely puts performance first. They've partnered with 3M to make perfect reflective surfaces for better visibility, and bright grey interior makes finding kit effortless and fast even in low light. With over 200 designs, PAX bags are made to suit your role, your needs and your environment. And thanks to their modular system, many bags work seamlessly together no matter the setup. PAX doesn't chase trends, their designs stay consistent, so once you know one, you know them all. And if your bag ever takes a beating, their in-house repair team will bring it back to life. PAX are built to perform, made to last. Learn more at pax.bags.com or head to the show notes for further details.
You're listening to the Pre-Hospital Care podcast on the Medics Academy Network.
Welcome back to the podcast. In this episode, this is another episode on translation of blogs into AI posts. I'm here with the author of two fantastic blogs. You're going to hear one this week, one next week. Ryan Atkinson, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, it's great to be with you. Thanks for inviting me on.
Pleasure, absolute pleasure. It's great to just dissect these blogs really and just unpack them really. So the first one we're going to tackle this week is local loss in a global crisis. So just as a framer, you used to work as the director of photography for really a national and international company, Ryan. And I think probably your perspective is fundamentally unique from that. You were a paramedic now, but you really had that like global overview. And could I get you to speak to the blog initially, why you wrote it?
Yeah, as you say, I'm a paramedic now, but haven't always been, and spent a best part of 14 years, I guess, working as a freelance director of photography. And I focused, I worked primarily within the wildlife space, but focused very much on kind of conservation and crossover stories, looking at wildlife and conservation issues and how they cross over with human stories, and the interplay between the environment and people. And yeah, this blog came about. I mean, so I initially wrote it actually as a kind of an essay to enter a competition, really, talking about how travel had impacted you and things like that. But it was a trip I did in, gosh, I think it was probably 2019, maybe. It was just before COVID. And it was for what was a privately funded feature film documentary looking at the issue of glacial melt, really, around the world, and how the loss of those water sources was kind of impacting the people that relied upon them, the environment, animals, global atmospheric sciences, things like that. And so this trip itself was out to Nepal, to the Langtang Valley, with the purpose really of climbing one of the mountains at the top of the valley called Yala Peak, and doing some pretty cool speed flying off the top of it to capture aerial footage of the glaciers, and then work with various local scientists and things like that. But so I think for me, it was my first trip to the Himalaya, and as a climber, it had always been something I wanted to do, somewhere I wanted to go, an environment I wanted to experience, and I sort of went into it very just excited, really. We were going to tackle a really important issue that I knew a reasonable amount about, but fundamentally, my motivation was, this sounds like a really cool trip. We're going to climb a mountain and film people speed flying off the top of it and have a great time. But as part of the trip, it required us to do sort of a 4 or 5 day trek up the Langtang Valley from the trailhead to reach base camp. And it was really that trek, we did some filming on the way, but we didn't go overboard filming the trek. That wasn't the main thing. So I had a lot of time, a lot of long days hiking, kind of lost in my thoughts. And the landscape of the Langtang Valley is incredible. So it was I think it was 2014 was the big earthquake in Nepal, and Langtang was hit really hard. And there's a village there. Well, it's not there anymore. But Langtang village itself was decimated by the earthquake. Almost the entire village buried. Hundreds of lives lost. It was really horrific, really tragic. And without sounding too metaphysical, there was walking up this valley, there was just there was like this heaviness that hangs in the valley. Like it's a place of joy and growth and incredible people, great food, life, all of that. But there's this heaviness that hangs over the whole valley. And you see it as you look up at the mountains around you. You can see these old hanging glaciers. There's no glaciers anymore. There's just scree slopes. And these are ancient mountains, much like the European Alps. They are held together by ice. And what happens when that ice goes? And the earthquake was a perfect example. I'm not a glaciologist, I'm not a geologist. I can't say for sure, but I suspect that we would have looked at a different picture had the ice still been bonding a lot of that together. And so walking up the valley, talking to various locals on the way in tea rooms and tea houses, things like that, and just learning their stories of the impact that they've had from glacial melt, loss of their primary water source. The Himalayan basin feeds the water for millions and millions and millions of people across the Indian subcontinent, and that's threatened. It's going. And so seeing all of that firsthand was really hard. But what was harder was thinking about why I was there. I was this guy from at the time I was living in Cardiff, fairly comfortable life, and I just sort of very literally helicoptered into this valley in Nepal to make a film that I thought was going to be impactful for people that watched it. But actually, it was the impact that it had on me and thinking about my lifestyle, and how that influences global crises. And that's not to shame myself. I'm guilty of leaving lights on. I run the tap too long sometimes, all of this stuff, but I'm hardly, a baron of an oil and gas company. But, these are people living in the death and destruction of a system, of a life support system that they have had next to no impact on why that's falling apart. They're suffering from choices made thousands and thousands of miles away. And that was really hard to see, and to think about. And I guess writing the blog for me was kind of a sort of cathartic way of processing those thoughts, um, of exploring that in a different medium to the film, which was fantastic, but I have no editorial control over. And it did. I do think it did a really good job of telling that story, and it did justice to the people that we met there. But the blog for me was my kind of way of both internally and externally processing that, which came at quite a pivotal point of my career where I was starting to ask a lot of questions about why I was doing what I was doing and whether it was worth it, whether it was worth the impact, all of that. And that's the next blog we're going to talk about, feeds into that a lot as well. But
Listen, that's powerful because, and it's really interesting because I think knowing you more and more, actually, Ryan, there was an exchange every time you went away. Like you said, there was maybe an itinerary and an agenda for the filming, but more and more I interview you, I realized you took away sometimes more than you gave, in a way, that the impact of local communities on you, and just hearing some of your other stories as well. Actually, you're just about to hear the blog transcribed, which is a really moving account, actually. In it, you speak to the resilience of communities. And again, the more I interview you, Ryan, the more I think the impression left upon you was as great as hopefully the impression you gave to the wider people through your photography and through your filming. Could I just, before we just hear it, could I get you to speak to just the resilience you found in the people there?
yeah, absolutely. And I agree with what you say there. I set out on that career path to change the world, to communicate these stories. Fundamentally, always was and always will be a storyteller in that regard. But it was really me that was impacted far more. And I speak about it a lot, and a lot of people in that have spent any real length of time in the expedition space will be probably familiar with the term change fatigue. When you're flipping from your comfortable life at home over to, what can be quite hazardous or high tension or just really harrowing environments, and the stories that you're hearing there, and it had a huge impact on me. And I think just to meet some of the people in these places living with the hardships that they live with, it gives you a perspective that nothing else can give you, nothing else that I've found in my life. Even being a paramedic and seeing some of the really challenging things that I see, the deprivation in parts of inner city London, it doesn't come close to how much what I've seen globally has influenced me. But I do think that that has fed in to this new era of my life, meeting people who smile in the face of so much adversity and live daily with such hardships. It sounds such a cliche to say, but until you've been there and you've walked that and you've witnessed that firsthand, you really can't. I struggle to put into words how much of a profound impact their resilience had on growing my own. And I do think that although that career, that part of my life is obviously very different to what I do now, it has dramatically impacted the way I cope with, the way I interact with, the way I communicate with people in my new career in healthcare. And I think it makes me and anyone else who's been in similar or sort of tangential footpaths, it can only serve to improve the way that you communicate with and interpret the world around you. And it was just profoundly moving to see these people and to have the privilege of taking 20 minutes out of their day to sit over a cup of tea and hear their stories, heartbreaking stories, but it didn't feel heartbreaking in the moment because there was still such hope there. And I think it just gives you perspective on like some of the problems that we can sit here and spend a lot of time worrying about in our society. There's a lot of upheaval in the UK at the moment, a lot of tension, a lot of concerns that people have, some of which you may agree with, some which you may not, but it just gives a perspective to everything, and it really does shape your worldview. Yeah.
Yeah, no, indeed. And to your point, it gives you a bigger spectrum of suffering actually than you're right, and it doesn't negate there's the social deprivation that you see day to day, like you said, in a place like London, but it gives you a wider perspective. I remember being in Malawi, in Blantyre and Queen's Hospital, holding a 6-month-old with TB in its spine and that had malaria and was HIV positive. And just, this little life was panting at, I don't know, it would be 40 to 50 respiratory rate, breaths per minute. It was for me, again, very different to life in London, but actually completely changed the context and reframed the way that I process suffering and or the local suffering, and widened that spectrum, to your point, widened the appreciation of getting out of just what you see in front of your face and just the suffering on a more global scale. You're just about to hear the blog. It's a fantastic blog. We'll be back next week with Ryan's second installment. Ryan, thank you.
Thank you.
So, you know that feeling, right? When you hear about these huge global crises, things like climate change, and, well, for those of us maybe in more temperate places like, say, the British Isles, it can feel really distant.
Mm-hmm. Abstract, almost.
Yeah, exactly. Like we're over here sometimes complaining about, too much water, literally.
Right.
While other parts of the world are facing just, well, desiccation, drying up.
It's a huge disconnect in experience, isn't it?
It really is. Makes it hard to connect, hard to internalize sometimes. Anyway, today we're doing a deep dive into this incredibly personal piece. It's by an adventurer, Ryan Atkinson.
Local loss in a global crisis.
That's the one. He shares his journey deep into the Hindu Kush Himalaya, that huge mountain range.
The third pole, they call it. Massive ice reserves there, spanning Nepal, India, Pakistan.
And our mission really is to explore how this kind of very personal encounter can completely shift how you see things.
Yeah.
like collective responsibility
Yeah.
and how our actions ripple outwards, even when they feel so far away.
What's fascinating here, I think, is how this particular deep dive brings a massive global thing, climate change, right down to a human scale. It's this really powerful first-person account, isn't it? It lets you see this huge planetary challenge, but through a very specific, very local lens.
Yeah.
And it helps us grasp those connections, the ones that are often invisible, between our lives, maybe our small daily choices, and the realities people are facing like halfway across the world. It's about understanding how our individual stories are sort of woven into this much bigger global story, whether we always see it or not.
Ryan kicks off his piece with this real self-awareness. I found it quite striking, actually. He admits his life as an adventurer is, and this is his phrase, a black mark on the carbon history of the world.
Wow, that's quite a statement.
It is. But then he adds that while his individual bit might seem small, it's definitely, quote, not insignificant.
Right, that paradox.
Yeah, it's this paradox, exactly. He talks about long flights to these remote places as being just a cramped inconvenience.
Yeah, just thinking about the legroom, the time zones.
Totally. Not the weighty environmental cost. What do you think stops us making those connections immediately?
Yeah.
Even when we sort of know better?
That's a really good question. And it's something Ryan touches on directly, actually.
Oh, does he?
Yeah. He suggests that in this world of likes and shares, as he puts it, responsibility becomes so collective that it kind of gets diffused. It feels less direct, less personal, maybe.
Right. Spread too thin.
Exactly. So we might know the facts, we understand the science intellectually, perhaps, but there's often this psychological gap, stopping us from truly feeling how our own choices, multiplied by millions, add up. His journey really illustrates that vividly, how these choices that feel abstract from our sofa, they have very real, very concrete consequences for other people.
So, okay, with that kind of mindset focused on the adventure, the thrill, he grabs this chance to travel to the depths of the world's lowest valleys and the caps of its highest mountains. That's how he puts it.
Sounds epic.
Yeah. He lands in polluted Kathmandu on a rainy autumn day, and he's ready, initially, to tell a geographic story of excitement and loss. He was there for the mountains, the big peaks.
Okay.
But then something changes for him, doesn't it? He says he initially had his eyes turned towards the goal above me, focused on the peaks.
Right.
But what was that big realization he had? The one that just completely shifted his focus.
Yeah, that's pivotal. He says, I very soon come to realize that the story I've come to tell lies not at the top, but at the bottom.
Wow.
His focus just completely pivots away from the huge geographic spectacle and towards the humanity living in the long cast shadows.
The people.
Exactly. And this is in the Langtang Valley, which he describes as still being scarred by the horrors of the 2015 earthquake.
Ah, yes. The devastating earthquake.
He paints a really vivid picture of the aftermath. Loose mountainsides where ice was once the glue, towns lost under the rubble. Mighty peaks are strewn in the valleys, burying generations and stories lost. But what really hits hard, I think, is his description of emptiness at height, where great rivers of ice once fed this mighty watershed.
That emptiness.
It's a landscape just fundamentally changed, a world turned upside down, as he says.
That imagery is so powerful. The emptiness, the scars from the earthquake.
Yeah.
But the source suggests there's like another layer to this devastation, doesn't it? Something linking it to the bigger global picture.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's crucial. What Ryan starts to see isn't just that the earthquake was terrible,
Right.
but that its impact, its devastation, was actually amplified by the changing environment, the changing biome.
Amplified. How so?
He describes it as a world turned upside down, partly by the earthquake, yes, but also by the consumption of my forefathers a globe away of myself.
Ah, okay. So he's connecting past actions, our consumption.
Exactly. It's this core insight. The earthquake's immediate horror gets tangled up with the long-term effects of climate change, human activity altering these fundamental systems, making landscapes more vulnerable.
So it makes things worse when a disaster hits.
Precisely. It forces you to confront this kind of chilling idea that maybe there aren't purely natural disasters anymore. Every extreme event seems to have some kind of human fingerprint on it now. And it means the consequences of our consumption, even from really far away, are felt acutely in places like Langtang.
It's a sobering thought.
It really is. It shows the long reach of our choices, past and present, making already vulnerable places even more fragile.
Okay, so his focus shifts away from the peaks, down to this scarred valley, and then, crucially, to the people living there, living in the long-cast shadows, as he put it. What does he find?
Well, he finds that the really striking thing about traveling through the highest mountains of the world isn't actually the mountains. No, it's the people who live there. He describes them as having generations of wisdom, tenacity, suffering, and joy etched into every friendly and curious face.
Wow.
And these are communities, he points out, who often choose simple rural toil over urban chaos and promised riches. They lead lives largely devoid of the luxuries of development.
Okay.
But what really seems to hit home for Ryan, the sort of injustice of it all, is this.
Yeah.
Their lives are devoid of the cause and yet marked by the effect.
Oof. Devoid of the cause and yet marked by the effect. That's powerful.
Isn't it? He sees rivers running dry and cliffsides perilously leering toward their upward gaze. They're living with these direct consequences.
Yeah, communities who've contributed basically nothing to global emissions, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Minimal contribution. Yet they're on the absolute front line, bearing the brunt of changes driven from thousands of miles away. How does he deal with the moral weight of seeing that? He struggles with it. You can tell it weighs on him heavily. It's a central theme. He acknowledges, that blame for nature's troubles cannot lie solely with humanity's presence.
Especially after something like an earthquake, yeah.
Right. But he says the question hangs heavy over these dark valleys. And that leads him to ask these really poignant what-if questions.
Like what?
Like, what if there were no cars, no factories, no unfettered consumption?
Questioning the whole system.
Exactly. They're not just throwaway questions. It's him really grappling with the root causes of the crisis and confronting the sheer disparity.
Yeah.
And he really hammers home the injustice when he says these are people with no contribution to the woes that now befall them, and yet here they live.
It just underlines that massive imbalance, doesn't it? Between who causes the problem and who suffers most.
Absolutely. It puts a human face on that concept of blameless suffering. It forces us, the readers, you listening, to think about the ethics baked into our global connections.
And yet, despite all this hardship, this, unchosen suffering, Ryan is just amazed by their resilience, isn't he?
Completely. He sees them as they rebuild, forever looking forward and upwards to their holy peaks.
Wow. Even after everything.
Yeah. He sees the climate crisis itself, the loss of life-giving glaciers, the threat of mountainsides collapsing as becoming just another line etched into their faces, old and young alike.
Just adding to lives already filled with uncertainty.
Right. But it doesn't seem to crush their spirit.
No. And what really gets him, what he finds so profound, is their response. He says they're choosing not to blame, but resolving to survive and thrive, summiting their own struggles beneath the watchful eye of the mountains. He actually calls it their blameless love of life.
Blameless love of life. That's beautiful.
It really is.
Yeah.
So how does seeing that, witnessing that kind of quiet strength against such huge odds, how does that change Ryan himself?
Oh, it leads to a total personal shift, a reckoning almost.
Yeah.
Seeing that resilience, that blameless love of life, makes him look at his own troubles, which he says are no less valid, but they suddenly feel all the more real to him.
Right. Puts things in perspective.
Massively. And if you connect it to the bigger picture, this whole experience just makes the distant global crisis intensely personal for him, more than any graph or news report could.
Yeah, I could see that.
He says it outright. We are separated by oceans and mountains, yet my opulent life directly makes theirs harder.
That's a direct link he's making. His life, their hardship.
It's not just intellectual anymore. It's emotional. It's moral. He recognizes his own part, however indirect, in a system that creates such awful disparities.
So what does he decide to do with that?
It leads to this really strong resolution. He says, I resolve to take their story home with me and carry it with me everywhere I travel, a marker for the reality of a global crisis on a local level.
So he carries their story.
Yeah, he went looking for a story about mountains, about geography, but he left with the people. Their story became the story. It completely flipped his initial goal. And for you listening now, how might hearing this story, Ryan's story, the Langtang story, how might that maybe challenge your own view of problems that seem far away your connection to them,
Yeah.
it really pushes us all to see the actual human cost, doesn't it, of this interconnected world we live in.
And that really brings us right back around, doesn't it? This deep dive into local loss in a global crisis. It shows such a profound shift.
Yeah.
Ryan's journey started looking up the huge mountains, the landscape, but it ended focused down on the people, their struggles, leaving this indelible mark on him. It hammers home his realization that the real story is at the bottom with the human experience, not necessarily at the top with the peaks.
Exactly.
So, okay, what does this all mean for us then? What's the takeaway?
Well, I think it means really connecting the global to the personal, truly understanding the real-world, tangible impact of things, of actions that can feel so detached from our daily lives.
Right.
And Ryan's journey shows that even when we feel maybe blameless or just really far removed from a crisis, our lives are still tangled up together in ways we often don't even realize.
Yeah.
The people of Langtang Valley, he says, are summiting their own struggles, which is just such a powerful metaphor, isn't it?
It really is. Resilience against incredible odds. Odds they didn't choose.
Exactly. So this deep dive, I think, it kind of invites you, the listener, to consider what local losses might we be contributing to globally, maybe without even knowing it.
That's a tough question.
It is. And maybe more importantly, what stories like this one from Langtang are you committed to carrying with you, letting them actually shape how you see things, how you act, long after you've finished listening?
Something to think about.
Yeah. How can understanding these distant struggles maybe bring a new kind of depth or meaning to our own choices right here?
You're listening to the Pre-Hospital Care podcast on the Medics Academy Network.